All right, everyone. So today we're focusing on Cambridge IGCSE Mathematics, topic of algebra and subtopic of factorization. So in this, we're basically looking at is the complete opposite of the previous lesson, where we're using distributive law to expand the bracket. We were multiplying out terms from the bracket, right? And when we were looking at common terms, we were simplifying. But here, what I need you to do is factorize, basically the opposite. So for example, if you look at the first one, which is x squared plus x, you can see that both terms have a common x in it. So I'm going to pull out that x outside the bracket. What does that leave me with? Well, I need x squared. So that leaves me with another x for the first term. And since I've already taken the x out of the second term, that just leaves me with 1. So x into x plus 1 is the factorization of x squared plus x. Similarly, if you look at the second one where we have 8x squared y plus 6xy squared, you can see that the common terms are 2 because 8 and 6 have factors of 2, and x squared and x, we can take out a common x there, and y squared, we can take out a common y there. So when I take out 2xy out of the first term, you can see that leaves me with 4 and x, because 4 times 2 is going to give me that 8, and I need another x to get the x squared. Similarly, I need the 3 here, so that 3 times 2 is going to give me 6, and the y into another y will give me that y squared, right? So it's very important to factorize off very carefully, looking at the powers involved. The other type of factorization is this one, where you may have to group together terms and factorize the first two terms and factorize the second two terms separately, and then do an overall factorization. So you can see between the first two terms highlighted here in blue, you can see that the 18 and 3 have a common factor 3, and also there's an x in both the terms. So I'm going to take out 3x there, and that leaves me with 6m for the first term and just negative n for the second term. So be very careful with your symbols here. And the second time, if you look at it, you can see that 12my take away 2ny, right? So again, you can factorize a common 2 there because 2 is a common factor, and you can take out a y there, which is going to leave me with, again, 6m negative n. And since the two brackets that we factorized here, 6m negative n, is the same, we can pull that as a separate bracket altogether and then take off the remaining terms of 3x and 2y to form a separate bracket. So overall, the factorization comes down to a double bracket factorization as indicated here. And if you have basically what we call a quadratic equation like this, or an expression like this, x squared plus 11x plus 24, where you have three terms, and the term in front of the x squared is just a 1, right? The number in front of x squared is 1. Then what we need to do to identify and factorize this is basically you need to find numbers that multiply to give you the constant term and add to give you the middle term. So in this case, I need numbers that multiply to give me 24, but add to give me 11. So you can see here what we've done in step number 1 is listed down all the factors of 24. So 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8. And then what we're doing here is basically seeing which factors add up to 11. So you can see that only 8 and 3 add up to 11. So therefore, those are the necessary numbers for our factorization. So we take it into the next step where we have x, and then you put in the factor that you have. So x plus 3 there. And similarly, this 8 comes in here as x plus 8. So the final factorization of x squared plus 11x plus 24 is equal to x plus 3 times x plus 8. Be very careful of how you have to include the double brackets. And finally, to finish off, we're going to look at how do you factorize when it is not 1 that is in front of the x squared, but actually another number. So that is, it's something like 2 or 3. So when you are doing that type of case, what you have to do is you still have to find factors which multiply, but you don't find factors which multiply to 5. You're going to find factors which multiply to the multiplication of 5 and the number in front of x squared. So that is, I need to find factors which multiply to 10. And if I list down the factors here, I have 1 times 10, 2 times 5, and that's it. And out of these two, you can see that I need 7x for the center. So that means I need to take 5 and 2 as the required factors. And what you do in the next step is basically break down the first line using the two factors that you obtained, and then you're going to use that common factor between the first two terms and the second two terms method here. So the common factor that I can take out for the first two terms is an x, and the common factor that I can take out from the second two terms is just positive 1. And from there, I can form that one of my brackets is 2x plus 5, and the other bracket consists of the remaining parts, which is x plus 1. So that should be the final answer. When you have a number in front of x squared, you must use this method. And that brings us to the end of the notes section. So let's try a few questions. All right, and we're going to finish off with a bunch of questions. So you can see factorize 8x squared negative 10x negative 3. So as we looked at in our last example, first what you need to do is multiply the two terms here. So that is negative 24, and then we're looking at factors for negative 24. So that could be negative 1 and 24, negative 2 and 12. Or it could be negative 3 and 8. But don't forget there's the other side of it. So there is negative 8 and 3, negative 12 and 2, and negative 24 and 1 as well, right? Any number could be negative when we need to multiply to get a negative 24. And if you look at which one would add together to give you negative 10, that has to be negative 12 and 2. So if we go about the next step of this problem, that is 8x squared, take away, instead of negative 10x, I'm going to put negative 12x plus 2x, and then have that negative 3 coming in at the end. And between the first two terms, when I factorize, I can take out 4 and I can take out x. So that leaves me with 2x minus 3. And from the second two terms, I can only take out a positive 1. So that as well leaves me with 2x negative 3. So finally, the two brackets is going to be 2x negative 3 and 4x plus 1. So that would be option number 2. Moving on, so when we have to factorize something like this, remember that order matters. So you may need to put this into order. So that is k squared negative 15k positive 54 is easier to see and solve. So we're looking at factors for 54 again. So that's 1 and 54, or 2 and 27, or I don't think 3 goes into it, neither does 4, but 6 and 9 do perfectly fit in for 54. And when we look at this, we need negative 15, so that means we have to consider the double negative multiplication. So that is, we can take factors like this. And if you look at the only factors which will give us the negative 15, that's going to be negative 6 and 9. So if I'm putting this into the bracket, that's going to be k is negative 6 and k is negative 9. So another way that we can write this is basically multiplying both the brackets by negative 1. So that would be 6 minus k and 9 minus k. So that would be option number 2. And finally, the last expression for the question. So 6x squared plus 2x. Again, we're looking at 2, which is the highest factor, and x, which is the highest variable we can factorize, leaving me with 3x for the first term and 1 for the second term. So again, answer is the second option here. And that brings us to the end of lesson with regard to factorization. Subscribe us now for more videos and content.